Hi, and welcome to Gutsy Christianity with Rosa Hopkins. I'm so glad that you've chosen to spend a portion of your Sunday with us. And today on our show, we have writer and author Cari Jehlik. It's good to have you on our show today, Cari.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all mine. And so we've been having conversations about anxiety and depression, mental health issues, and the church. And so my understanding is that the church at this point in time overall is not typically equipped to handle people that come to them and say, I'm depressed, or I have anxious thoughts, I'm fearful. And so just give us a little bit of insight into your experiences, and if you could tell us, why do you think that often is the case?
That's a really great question. So my experience, I was diagnosed with depression in college, and I was put on medication. I saw a handful of professionals, and they recommended that I talk to my home church at the time. And so I went home and I talked to them, and everyone was really nice, but they clearly had no idea what to do with that. I think churches like more shorter illnesses, maybe you could call it. They know what to do with that. Things that are chronic and more long-term, it seems that they have more difficulty supporting that. And there are a number of churches, generally on the more conservative end of the spectrum, who view mental illness as a spiritual issue or like a demonic possession. And so they just have they have a misunderstanding of what mental illness is. And so they don't feel equipped to deal with it, or they're poorly equipped to deal with it because of that belief. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so if they're seeing it as a spiritual issue instead of something that may be a biochemical issue or something that arises from circumstances, say, for example, something like post-traumatic stress disorder, things that can happen from the brain being overwhelmed and having these experiences basically filtered the only way in which it knows how. And we were designed to be able to cope with things in a certain way because life is often more than what we can handle. So when they're approaching it from that point of view, what often gets lost in the handling of it that way? For example, if you're a person that has depression or anxiety and you're in the church pew, do you feel that there's anyone that you can reach out to? Are you likely to hear sermons about handling anxiety and depression and that sort of thing?
At my church, my pastor does talk about his own struggles with grief and depression, just with his own personal story. So in that way, we've talked a little bit about it. But as far as sermons about anxiety or depression and how to deal with that, I think that's pretty rare, actually. And so not talking about it from the pulpit doesn't do anything to decrease stigma. And that's a big problem too, is there's so much stigma surrounding mental illness because I think it's still fairly poorly understood overall. And so it's you could call it like an invisible disability, where it's easy to understand a disability if somebody is in a wheelchair or some other very obvious way. But when it's all inside your head and you look perfectly normal, it's hard for people to be like, oh, well, nothing seems wrong. You don't seem like you're depressed. You don't seem like you're anxious. And that's difficult because, yeah, sure, I can hide it if I want to, but it makes it difficult to talk about, and it makes it difficult to understand.
Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like basically people that are depressed or anxious, and I can include myself in that too, pretty well are left to cope with it alone instead of having the church body come and carry one another's burdens. It also sounds like there might be a little bit of what the friends of Job did, where they wanted to figure out what he had done to cause this to come upon himself. Because if you're having a spiritual problem, that's only half step away from saying you have a sin in your life that's causing this. And if you were an upright, shiny, happy Christian like me, you wouldn't be having this. And so I would imagine that adds shame and guilt on top of the anxiety and depression that a person's already feeling, and that doesn't help them at all. And so just can you walk us through your own journey a little bit? What things have you found that have been able to help you in your seasons of anxiety and depression?
Well, anxiety is actually fairly new for me. I think I've always had it. I just never knew that's what it was. And so when I discovered that I had anxiety, the first thing I did is I actually talked to my husband about it. And I said, I think I have anxiety, and it makes me really anxious to tell you that. So I personally just started talking about it, and I started saying, I feel anxious telling you this, or I feel anxiety that people don't actually like me. And I assume that my friends just tolerate me. They don't actually like me. They don't actually want to be around me. And even just voicing that stuff out loud helps. Even if it's just to my husband, like I don't think I've told my friends yet. Like there are times I don't think you like me. I'm just not sure how that would be for our friendship. But so for me, that's been one. I did talk to my doctor about it when I went for a physical, and she laid out some options. We could do medication, which I declined for now because I feel like I'm managing.
And so what have you found when you've been open about it and you've been brave enough to let people know about it? Do you find that people relate to that, or they'll say, I struggle with that as well? Do they feel relief?
Yeah, I think so. Even if someone hasn't struggled with anxiety personally or hasn't struggled with depression personally in a clinical sense, I think every single human being on the face of the planet has had a season or a day where they have felt depressed or where they have felt anxious. You know, have you ever taken a test? Have you ever known somebody who's died? Depression, anxiety, right there. I think it does help for people to know that they're not alone, especially those who are struggling themselves. These are illnesses that are very isolating, or they make you feel isolated. The way that they can just affect your biochemistry inside your brain, it can trick you into believing that you're the only one. Nobody else feels this way. And as a spiritual or religious person, as a Christian, however you want to phrase that, it's easy to even bring onto yourself, like, I must not be a very good Christian because I feel like this. God must not love me. And that is absolutely not the case at all.
Absolutely.
I think that we need to be talking about this because there still is so much stigma surrounding mental illness that the more we talk about it, like, yes, I'm a quote unquote normal person, and I still have anxiety. And so quote unquote normal people can have anxiety. I mean, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, depends on the statistic you read, suffer with either depression or anxiety. Like you said, this is in our churches, this is in our pews, this is the person you're sitting next to, and you have no idea because nobody talks about it. But I think the church should be the perfect place to talk about this because we are all broken people coming in to the same God.
And what you were saying about how when God says, be not afraid, do not worry, it's not in this stern school teacher, you better not worry. And if you do, you're in trouble because I'm going to zap you with lightning. I mean, that sounds so comforting, doesn't it? I mean, you have to understand when God is speaking to us, it's as his children, as a father. When he says that if you, being evil, know how to give your kids good gifts when they ask you, how much more is your heavenly Father going to do that for you? And how he would gather us as his chicks if we would allow it. It's a tenderness. It's like, when my child is screaming and upset and scared, and she actually doesn't get scared over too many things, but when she's upset, and if I'm stroking her hair on her forehead, and I'm like, it's okay. I'm not saying if you don't stop screaming right now, I will be disappointed. I'm trying to just soothe as best I can. And so we need to, I think that shows a little bit about our perception about God is a little skewed. And then the second thing about what you were saying that I think is so vital when you're saying this is a struggle, the depression, the anxiety that we as Christians have, a lot of times in Christian circles, what people want is the story of overcoming. And the Bible says, yes, we are overcomers. This is absolutely the truth. But at the same time, there are things like you see, Paul struggled. He had a thorn in the flesh. He was an overcomer. Nevertheless, there was this struggle. Jesus was with him the whole time, giving him strength and grace in that. But when we expect, because I'm not going to ask you, so tell me about how you overcame depression and anxiety and how you have never had a bad day again for the rest of your life, because it's not realistic. And it'll set people up for failure, you included, me included, the listeners included. And so I would never put that out there, but instead say that it's something you may struggle with. It's something you may need medication for. I personally never have gone that. Well, I did go that route because I'm a very old person. Like 20 years ago, a long time ago. I tried that and it didn't work for me. But there are many people, I have friends that swear by it, and I believe them. I absolutely believe that. And so God has the way for each person, but it's absolutely something that people struggle with. And so,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
God gave us brains. God has given us the ability to understand how brains work, to understand science, to understand medicine. Medicine is not evil. If your kid breaks their leg, are you going to stick them on the couch and pray for them for 2 months? No, you're going to take them to the doctor. You're going to set their leg and put it in a cast. Let the leg heal.
And yet some sects will do that. Some will just sit them on the couch and just pray about it.
Right. And I think that is not the best use of our faith. I think that we need to use what God has given us. He has given us modern medicine. Thank the Lord for modern medicine. I am so ecstatic that I live now and not 200 years ago, where you could die of an abscessed tooth, So I think we need to definitely be encouraging people to seek out therapists, to get into counseling, find somebody you can talk to. Take medication if that's what you need to do. I have certainly not swept that off the table. I believe right now that I'm able to manage my anxiety without medication, but I know that there are people who cannot manage their anxiety without medication. So please take your pills.
Absolutely.
And feel better, just because there is no reason that you need to feel awful every day when there is a solution at your doctor's office.
Absolutely. And so with that, it's time for us to conclude. Where can our listeners find you, Cari Jehlik, online?
I have a website, carijehlik.com. That's CARIJEHLIK.com. And I don't write a whole lot about mental health on my website, but I do share my writing and my thoughts on other things. So I certainly would love for you to connect with me there. I'm on the social medias all over the place. You can find all the connections at my website to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and everything.
Okay.
I try to do way too much.
Same here. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cari Jehlik, for being on Gutsy Christianity with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.